Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So guys, finally got a new camera, finally got a new mic. So I am really hoping this turns out pretty good. So I'm going to respond to a few questions that I got in one of my previous videos. I'm not necessarily going to respond directly, but I think what I'm going to say in this particular commentary is going to explain my thinking on it, or explain it a little bit further. So, have you ever sat back and thought of what the world could be? I mean, literally just letting your imagination go, and you come up with an idealized version of the world. Now, if you're going to do that, there's a fundamental principle that must be adhered to if you're going to have any consistency within your model. Any move, any motion, any action has a concession associated with that action. It doesn't matter what it is. So say for instance, if I'm playing chess, I move e4. E4 is a perfectly good move. I enjoy that move. It's probably one of my favorites. It gives me space, but at the same token, it weakens my king side. Now, the gain in space for me, though, is worth more than a concession. Just because it's a concession doesn't necessarily mean it's a deal breaker. It just means that there's a consequence of something that you're doing. Let's use a real world example. Let's say I wanted to be a bodybuilder, and I wanted to be in competitions. I wanted to just bulk up, just be huge and massive. Right off the bat, you can see a few issues. Any situation where I'm at the airport is probably going to be somewhat uncomfortable. Suits are probably going to be somewhat uncomfortable. I'm probably going to make people uncomfortable just from my size. Whether or not those things are deal breakers or not purely depends on me and the objectives that I'm trying to accomplish. In this particular case, if I don't care about those things, then yeah, I'm going to do what I need to do to bulk up, and I'm going to be a bodybuilder. So whether or not in your evaluation of the concessions, there are three things that you need to pay attention to. A, the concession itself, meaning, is this concession a deal breaker right off the bat? If I take this step, am I stepping into a bear trap? The second one has to do with the concession as it relates to your overall objective. So essentially, does your concession conflict with what you're trying to accomplish? There's no point in doing it if you're going to clash. The last one has to do with why you're doing this particular concession. Meaning, why are you making this move? So, and for that matter, how does this move relate to the concession itself? Now, this is rather important. So say, for instance, I ran outside in my assless chaps in the rain with no shirt on, but my house was on fire. Yes, I would rather not be outside in assless chaps. I would rather not be anywhere in a pair of assless chaps. But certainly if my house is on fire, that's a better alternative. So the concessions themselves are just kind of a fundamental principle of action. Can't get away from it. I'm going to read this particular section of a text because it kind of makes the point I want to make, and I'm going to explain it because it is slightly dense. So stay with me on it. I'll go through it pretty quick. Man is born with nothing. To persist in a rudimentary way, he requires food, water, air, and shelter. To not just survive, but to prosper in optimum physical and mental health, he requires nutritious food, clean water, clean air, shelter, and a sufficiently developed sense of self. These are natural and fundamental attributes necessary for self-actualization. What I mean by self-actualization, I just mean optimum humanity, meaning this is the best version of this particular person. So extending this simplistic, prosperous model of the individual to any kind of arbitrarily large system, let's say a society, that in no way changes the fundamental needs of that particular individual. Meaning that even if you're in a society, for the most part, those needs are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. The idealized collective pursuit and attainment of those fundamental requirements for optimum humanity is the societal natural order of things. Insofar as the societal natural order of things is ignored and the necessary qualities are in lack, the overarching society will suffer. It's making the point that if those things are natural for a person to be actualized, meaning if I want to be the best person that I can be, the highest version of myself, physical and mental, there's certain qualities that I need. I'm not a complete package right off the bat. We're born into a particular fabric of society. That particular society has to give us things to put us intact. We're not rugged individualists. That's a myth. I'm making this point that insofar as there's lack, insofar as those things are missing to that particular individual, that society, the overall society, will suffer because of it. And you have to understand why. If people compensate in different ways when they don't have the things that they need. Now, you have some people who can suck it up and just deal. You have other people who do not deal well at all. The problem will express itself in the society itself. So, in the same way that pain is used to indicate a problem in conflict with the natural order of a physical system, social systems are also governed by a similar feedback mechanism to indicate disease or defects in the model. Man-made realities that were counter to the natural order will be punished by the logical contradictions in a proportion directly corresponding to the degree the false reality conflicts with the natural order. Under this model, the plagues of a society are not the result of an angry and punitive God, but are natural and necessary indications of errors in the arrangement of man's subordinate reality. Crime, poverty, war, corruption, violence, illness, depression, drug abuse, lack of empathy. Those things are not defects and failings of the individual. Those things are indictments of the society that that person came from. Constriction and energy flow of the social system functions in a similar fashion, meaning the vagaries of a system are not anomalies of an otherwise awesome system, but are inherent to the model. Any elegant and organic correction will need to directly address the model and bring it into alignment with the natural social order. Otherwise, the problems would appear intractable and pretty much remain intractable. So it's making this case that in the same way that the body, for the most part, if it's missing something that it needs, some kind of nutrient, some kind of mineral, whatever, that body would develop illness. That illness can present in multiple different ways. People are different. So how it presents may be different, even though the cause of that particular illness may be exactly the same thing. It's a deficiency. I'm making the point that many of the physical system, or many of the systems, societal-wise, the plagues of our particular society, are defects in the model. It has to do with things that are lacking in the system itself that's causing it to present as social problems. Crime, war, poverty, illness, etc., etc. You kind of have to ask the question, do you really want to hold on to this model if those are the concessions? And we need to put this in context. Like if you're going to say, well, yes, I want to hold on to this model, I believe in capitalism. That's fine, but understand, anything that you do, anything that you undertake, there are concessions associated with it. Oftentimes, we look at capitalism as we mistaken commonality for natural order, meaning that capitalism seems natural just because we're used to it. It does not, in fact, mean that it's natural. In fact, I will make the argument that it runs counter to that. The fact that you have so many vagaries in our society is kind of an indication that that particular society is sick, and that society is not functioning in coordination with reality, with the logical bias that's in reality with regards to how our systems unfold. So what do you do in that situation? If you're saying that all those things are perfectly okay, crime, war, poverty, etc., those are concessions. And we also need to put this in context. 3 of those concessions are deal breakers, meaning they can exterminate life on this planet. So you have one situation in regards to environmental degradation. Whether you climate change. You have another one dealing with war, meaning we have enough weapons to destroy all life on this earth. And the last one has to do with technology purely for the sake of profit, without necessarily a social need or even a justification. So you have a situation where, let's say, GMO plants, in addition to pesticides. If it's true that those things are causing the disappearance of the bees, for the most part, we're doing something purely for the sake of profit that is literally killing ourselves. This is an insane system. That's the point I'm getting at. If we're analyzing the concessions that we make for a particular system to make the determination on whether that system is worth it or not, if 3 of these things are deal breakers, and let's also put it, let's go into further context. For the environment part, I believe it was 1950 or 1960, one of the oil companies wanted to commission a study on what would be the environmental effects of their industry. Well, what's going to happen if we continue the way that we're continuing? Even back then, 40, 50 years ago, the scientists essentially came up and said, well, there's going to be some kind of environmental changes associated with what you do. Meaning the stuff that you're taking out the ground and pumping into the sky is going to adversely affect life on this planet. What do you think that good capitalists did? They buried that report and they attacked the science. In the same way that cigarette companies attack the science. It was inhibiting their profit. But we need to understand this is not necessarily that these people are psychopaths. These people are just people. They're functioning under this particular model. In their minds, I would rather have this profit and maybe deal with the consequences of something that's cataclysmic and life-changing later on. That's an insane system. That's an insane thought. The thing that they're chasing is not real. The thing that's going to be destroyed is. Is that really a concession that you're okay making? Look, if you're going to be an advocate for capitalism, like Nancy Pelosi said, we're capitalists. Fair enough. You have to admit that these are vagaries of that particular system. Each one of these issues that we brought up, what is the cost of a person who's working a job that they hate for 40 years? What's that cost? Like, what's that toll to the individual? Do you really believe that person has things that person needs to be self-actualized? The system itself, capitalism, you need to understand how it functions. It functions on this principle of exploitation, of human frailty. In the same way that this model makes this argument of, if this person doesn't have these things, that person will not be self-actualized, and there will be vulgarities that occur in the system. Capitalism works off of those frailties, meaning it's in direct conflict with that person being self-actualized. It prods people forward by meaning it's like, hey, if you need something to eat, if you need somewhere to stay, if you need water, those things are going to depend upon the labor that you put into this. Meaning if you don't work, you don't get fed, you don't get a place to stay. It prods you forward. So in that sense, yes, the model does provide a social push. But is that social push really worth all of those things that are a result of this particular profit motive? I mean, that's kind of the point that I'm making. If it's true that everything has a concession, if it's true that we need to analyze those concessions to know whether or not the moves that we're making are adequate, if 3 of these are potential deal breakers in the sense of destroying life on Earth, if the other ones are social plagues, everything from crime, war, poverty, illness, depression, etc., etc., you got to make the case to me. Why is this okay? Most of the people who make this argument, or most of the people who hear something like this, they would say, well, yeah, that's true, but it's the best thing that we got. That's a failure of creativity. You got to understand, the system itself does protect itself. There is certain propaganda built into the system. If you knew that transitioning away from capitalism for the most part meant liberty and freedom. Let's say, for the most part, equality and freedom was universal. Let's say you could see the model. Let's say it was crystal clear. You could even have a path where step 1, 2, 3, 4 get you there. If you got $20 billion in the prior system, in the current model, are you transitioning to that new system? Even though it would cure all of these ills, are you transitioning to that new system? Because understand, for you, from that perspective, you're giving up your elite status, your power, your influence. All of those things are illusions of that particular current system. If you're getting rid of that particular system and you're getting rid of all of these vagaries, that person is going to lose their power in that sense. Yes, they're just going to be an average person. Yes, they're just going to be equal and free, and they're going to have access to everything else just like everybody else. But from the vantage point of the individual, they're losing their advantage. I would wager that that advantage is more important to them than everybody else having a better existence. Understand what they're fighting for. Half of the world, literally more than half of the world, exists off of $10 a day. A large percentage of that exists off $2 a day. Even if you're going to the United States, you're talking about a situation, the richest country in the history of the planet. You have people sleeping on the street, even though you have other people with billions and billions of dollars. This is maddening to me. I mean, you have this situation where you have a very few people. I think it's like 6 people have more wealth than half of the entire world. A very small, select few people have billions in excess. The rest of society, for the most part, existing in the spot where they're either sleeping on the street, working multiple jobs that they absolutely despise, or terrified that they're going to end up in the last 2 slots. Is this really the society that you want? And is this really the thing that you conceived of when you were thinking of an idealized society? If I'm right, and for the most part, anything that you do has a certain concession associated with it, are you okay with these concessions? And if you're not okay with these concessions, what do you want to do? I'm going to make another video in regards to the transition itself. But it's more important initially just to understand the situation that's we're presented with. Like, this is not willy-nilly. This is not one of those things where I bring up just to bring up. I bring it up because I think it's severe. We have an option. Our world is what we want this world to be. We make that choice. And the things that we do, the things that we say, the things that we think, the things that we believe, we build our world. It doesn't have to be this way. This is a choice. It doesn't seem to be a choice, but it is a choice. It is a collective consensus choice. We can make changes. The changes don't even have to be drastic. They can be, look, whatever change that you make, if you're addressing the actual cause of the problem, the root cause, then you're going to solve a lot of these problems. And the society will back you up because you're solving those problems. The elites will hate your guts. So what? So what? Don't have a failure of creativity, or don't let fear get in your way of thinking about what this world could be. Ultimately, you have nothing to lose but your chains. That is a real and honest thing. Feel free. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. If you guys think I'm wrong on something, let me know. I think this argument is perfectly concise. It's making this point that if this particular thing is a deal breaker, if this is a bear trap, why are we continuing to stay here? Yes, we're out the house in assless chaps, but god damn it, the house is on fire. I'm making the case that if these things are deal breakers, if these things are red lines, then certainly you can't stay in the red line. This is going to collapse at some point. We can change it. It doesn't have to be this way. In my next video, I'm going to go into explaining transitions from our current model into a better model. I don't want this video to get too long, and sometimes these things can run pretty long. Look, guys, feel free to share, comment, all that good stuff. And, of course, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Thanks, guys.